So I did my best. I didn't demand this of anybody else. I already had quite a bit of a bias towards the show. I'm a hardcore Tolkien fan. I love the original books. One of my favorite books is The Hobbit. I love the original movies. They're some of my favorite movies. So clearly I'm going to judge this mirrored against the other works. But I did my best to view it as its own thing, just to separate it and be as fair as possible, despite the fact that it's going to be difficult to be fair when I've already heard like 20 reviews of the show and I know what's going to happen and I know the problems with it. But because I had such a expectation it was going to be just a steaming pile of horse crap, which it is, it didn't hit as bad as my expectation was. I think my bigger disappointment was the writing. And the writing overall for episode 1 was just abysmal. The character dialogue, the way stuff sets up. Galadriel's not a likable character.
No, she's terrible. The thing is that I'm wondering if there will be a lot more disappointment later. You know what I mean?
There
It's
might
like
be, but
this is the first episode.
The best we could do is judge it by the first episode. So
yeah. So I'm very much like you, Rhett. I read The Hobbit when I was in grade school, and I read the Lord of the Rings when I was in junior high, and I have read those books now. I can't tell you how many times I've read them, and I own multiple copies of them. I own like really nice hardback editions of them, um, as well as like some paper, some I've gone through at least one set of paperbacks. I can't read them anymore because they're falling apart. They actually belong to my dad, um,
anyway,
and stuff. And so I'm with you. Like, I anytime I see something Tolkien where they're coming out and they're saying, "Hey, Lord of the Rings, hey, The Hobbit," I'm hopeful because I want to see them done well. I want to see them on.
I
I want to
definitely
see
was in the camp
that
of I
honor.
wanted it to be good.
Yeah, but I definitely had a problem watching this, um, because of all the negative press that had come out. I expected it to be awful. I expected it to be the worst
And
viewing
you think that
experience of my life.
colored your perception going
I
into it?
do. I do think it colored my perception. The thing is that I think if this was something like I didn't care about it at all, and I wasn't so steeped in the lore as I am, I think I may have enjoyed it, but realized that there were a
Oh,
bunch
I
of
wouldn't
problems
have.
with it. Like,
I wouldn't
uh,
have.
well, I may have enjoyed it for the spectacle, not necessarily for what it was. You know what I mean?
Just as a generic
I
fantasy.
don't know if
I,
I'm.
I, I
Yeah.
suppose. I mean, let's keep it as general perception because we'll go into bit of detail here in a moment. Silver, what do you think generally of the show?
I don't think they executed it well at all. The writing, especially the dialogue, is so weird. Like the quote you put, or quote, their whole rock thing. They're trying to be they're trying to act like they're Tolkien or something, and it's just not working.
To me, that bit of dialogue reminded me of the emo kid in high school and him saying stuff to try to sound deep.
My
Yes,
parents
that's what
don't
it feels like.
understand me.
Yeah.
They're trying to sound mythical and wise, and it's like,
Well, it just doesn't make any
what?
sense. To address Jesse's point, is this a good series if you weren't relating it to Lord of the Rings? Solely based upon the first episode, because we're going to watch one episode a week until season 2 comes out. Solely based upon the first episode, it is I would consider it a mediocre, poorly written, badly constructed fantasy show with way too much money.
Yeah.
If you have nothing to do and there's literally you only have this show to watch, why not as a lark? But I wouldn't recommend it at all. Like it's
The
just
thing
not.
is that they definitely did really well with the visuals. You know what I mean?
Sometimes
It
no.
the well, so but like the scenery, I wouldn't say necessarily like
I wouldn't
the
agree.
people
All of the
because
backgrounds you were clearly green screen, all of them. There
true.
was a moment where they're standing by a cliff. You know what? Let's just start at the beginning. So they start out at Valinor, and there are a bunch of little kids running around. Now, to give people context, Valinor is like heaven,
Yeah,
essentially,
it's
in
where the
Lord of the
gods live.
Rings. It's where the gods live. It's where the elves come from. And little kids are running around, and she makes a paper boat that's gonna sink. Like I don't know what she thinks is gonna happen. It's gonna sink. But she puts it in the water, and then basically she gets bullied by a bunch of kids who throw rocks at her boat, and it sinks, and then she gets in a fight with them. Immediately I'm like, in
It
heaven?
doesn't make any
You're
sense.
having a fist fight in heaven? Bullying is a thing in okay. All right.
Yeah.
Like the
It makes
kids
there,
are bullying her because she's trying
like,
to be this visionary whatever. All right.
there's absolutely no context for that scene.
No.
None whatsoever.
She's just
It's like
floating a
we
boat.
don't know. Yeah, it's like she's putting the boat in the water. This is like you're you know you're chilling with your friends on a summer day, and they're like, and you're like, hey, I learned how to make a paper boat, and they're like, oh, cool, let's see it. And then for some reason it turns vicious. It's like what in the world is going on here? There's no
Well,
context for that scene at all.
and
It doesn't
it
help us
wants you.
identify with Galadriel at all.
Well, they're trying to give you a scene where Finrod, her brother, sits her down and gives you advice. So the bullies sink her boat so that he could sit down and tell her something that's going to be profound so that she can reflect on it, and it might mirror her story or give it as a guide for where her character is going to go into the future, that sort of thing. Um, I typed out exactly the dialogue. So I'm going to read this to you, and I want you to do your best to tell me what in the hell they're talking about. All right? Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot? Because a stone sees only downward. The ship feels the darkness as well. Let's see. The darkness of the water is vast and irresistible. The ship feels the darkness as well, striving moment by moment to master her and pull her under. But the ship has a secret, for unlike the stone, her gaze is not downward but up, fixed upon the light that guides her, whispering of grander things than darkness ever knew. But sometimes the light shines just as brilliantly reflected on the water as they do in the sky. And she says, it's hard to say which way is up and which way is down. How am I supposed to know which lights to follow? And then that he reveals later what he says about that. Not only is it practically like uncomprehensible, like the dialogue,
Mhm.
but it's written to try. I guarantee you, they thought that they were sounding Tolkien-esque, and they were trying to make
Yeah.
it sound profound, as if Tolkien had written him this himself. He did not write any of this dialogue. This conversation never happens in the books, and it
No.
is the biggest pile of horse crap. Like, what are they
Not the
talking?
first thing you hear.
Yes, this is the first thing you hear. And I'm like, what do you mean boats look up and rocks look down? Like, I suppose symbolically. Um, the boat is supposed to represent her, I
Yeah,
guess.
I think that's what they're going for. Eventually, she'll be either tempted by the dark, and she needs to choose the light, and that's what um, what she'll end up doing. But yeah, it's complete and utter nonsense. It makes no sense at all, and there's no context for that particular scene other than some payoff later down the line.
Kind of. It's not even a great payoff, if I'm going to be honest.
No.
But
No,
after that,
she's gonna be tempted by Sauron, and the words of her brother are gonna come into her mind, and she's gonna turn away from him. Blah blah blah. It's
at any rate, after that, you get glory shots uh, of the land. You see the two trees, and then there's a bunch of internal dialogue because it seems like there's an effort to remember Peter Jackson's movies, like the soaring shots over the map to give you like an idea of where they're going to be and that sort of thing. And there's the over dialogue with Morfydd Clark, who plays Gladriel, sort of giving you the dialogue over it. Morfydd Clark is not great. I'm just gonna tell you. And then it shows
maybe she's a good actress. Maybe
Not this.
maybe she's not. I can't tell because of the garbage that they gave her in this movie to act out.
Oh, and by the
she
way,
just comes across as insufferable and unlikable.
yes, and that's a problem for a character you're supposed to like, who's the center of the story.
Yeah.
It shows a pile of skulls.
You need to
and it
root for that
implies
main character.
it shows a pile of skulls, and it implies that Sauron kills her brother and puts the scar on him, and she's really butthurt about it. So she goes off on this quest. And I know later, I know this is a little bit of a reveal for the future, but they call her the leader of the Army of the North, which, as far as I could tell, is like 10 people. But they have the scene where she's climbing up a cliff and she enters this area, and there's this weird moment where she's like, evil is here because it's colder. And I was like, when was evil colder? All right.
Yeah, that was strange.
Evil is always cold. Didn't you know that?
You could tell there's an evil presence because it is cold. Or you're in the mountains.
And right from the get-go, all of her soldiers are like, this is stupid, why are we here? I would have protested before we got up that cliff. Not after you get to the top and been like, you know what? I'm not happy about this journey. Let's go home, you guys. But no, they get to the top, and there's this clear message of her soldiers aren't happy with her. They find this sort of tower and some tortured orcs, I guess, in the area. She finds the symbol that was written on her brother, and she's like, this means something. We need to keep going on this insane journey of revenge because I'm a psychopath. And the soldiers like, we're not going to do that. She kills this ice troll, and they're like, we're going home no matter what, you crazy woman. And that's practically most of the beginning part.
Yeah. The thing is that once again, we're at a point where all we see is her obsession. There's not even an indication that there's a message left behind for anybody who's following along to be like, oh, if you're one of the evil people, you need to keep going north. There's none of that. The sign that she finds is hidden, and they only stumble across it by accident. One of the elves leans against this thing, and it turns out that it's hot. Yeah. And he like jerks back, and then she like pours some water over it, and it reveals the symbol that they've been tracking. But there's nothing. All you see is the symbol. It's not even a symbol with a message that says, "Sorry, we left. Go north." You know, there's no indication of that this is a step in the journey to where the enemy is ultimately hiding. There's nothing.
Well, it also implies
there is no
that
indication.
Like I don't know what the storytellers are trying to say here, but they're giving me the impression that she's accomplished nothing. That she's gone on this journey and got nothing done. And it gets to a point where even her soldiers are like, we're not doing this anymore.
I mean, it would be something completely different for us if she got there and there was a clear indication that not only was evil here, which is we've got that, but that there was an indication of where it went from here. If there was some sort of indication that was like, if you find this sign, that means go this way. If you find this sign, it means go this way. Something of that nature where it's like, instead, this just looks abandoned, and all we
Well,
know is that sign could have been left there magically by what was going on beforehand.
well, Jason,
And
they
so,
set
yeah,
it up heavily in the show, but we haven't gotten there. That essentially she's the only one that sees the problem that's coming. She's the only one with the wisdom to know what's going to come down. And everybody else is blind to what's going to happen. So she's basically smarter than the rest of us. She knows better than the rest of us. And basically all of the important elves just don't know anything. They're delusional, if you will.
right.
Um,
Yeah, no, I get that, but but that's a huge problem with the story. You need to you need to pull the viewer, the reader, whoever. You need to pull them along so that they're on the same page um with the
with the main
protagonist.
character.
We
Yeah.
can't be left sitting there going, the protagonist is a crazy lady. We have to say no, everybody else is wrong and she is right, and we have to they have to point out to us that the clues that she picked up that other people missed,
Well, and
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 they haven't
she
done that.
the characters around her present her as if she's crazy. She herself,
Yeah,
her acting is presented like she's crazy. And I don't know how else to interpret that this is an insane woman on a revenge kick that she's never going to let go of. That this is what the show is
right,
telling me to interpret. Like I don't know.
right,
I don't know how to interpret it any differently. We don't want to get bogged down in the details. Silver,
exactly.
anything to add before we move on?
Just yeah, she's put across as like very arrogant,
Yeah.
won't listen to anyone else.
Yep.
I do what I want, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we see the quote unquote Harfoots. Um,
Oh gosh.
the reason why they're Harfoots and not hobbits is because Amazon doesn't own the rights to say hobbits. So they're called Harfoots. And they're basically presented as a bunch of degenerate, homeless, dirty, dirty people.
Yeah,
Just wandering around.
they steal stuff, and yeah, they're basically gypsies, or at
Yeah.
least the European conception of gypsies. They wander in and they steal stuff, and
Well, and there
they
aren't
hide.
that many of them. How many would you guess there are?
There look to be maybe 50 tops.
Yeah. A very small group of people, very insular. And immediately we're like, oh, this is a very diverse group of people. And it's like, I'm going to
Yeah,
address this as
there's
not that I care that they're diverse, but if they were, let's say, darker skinned individuals and lighter skinned individuals in a very small group of people, they would have interbred and they would have all been brown, sort of thing.
yeah,
But we have
yep,
very clearly there's some black Harfoots and very clearly there are some white Harfoots, and all of them have British accents of one sort or another. So if this story wanted to present an accurate portrayal of a very small insular group of people, they would all be brown because they would have all
it'd be
intermarried at this
homogenous.
point. Right. They would be
Yep,
more homogenous because there's no other population to interact with where they can add new, different, like darker melanin people or lighter melanin people, who, however, the group started out as.
yeah,
So immediately I'm like, okay, so this decision was made mostly for the reason we all know it was made for, because hey,
yeah,
we need more diversity in this, but whatever. Um, they come across as mostly just like degenerate hobo-ish. I get the impression that much like when the hobbits are presented in Lord of the Rings, that you're supposed to watch this and sort of giggle at little goofy moments, and I got nothing out of the whole presentation. Nobody, there
No.
was no quirky moments where I was like, haha, that's a funny little person, or that here's a person doing some other little like quirky thing. Like none of the characters came across as charming or interesting. They find some berries and they eat them like absolute savages. Like just shut. They basically grab
Something
berries and rub them on their
audio.
faces and partially get into their mouths. That's essentially how that comes across.
It is like a bunch of toddlers, like, ah,
Yeah.
berries.
Yeah, it's a bunch of toddlers. Um, Head Harfoot. I know he's a famous British actor, but I don't watch British television. With the sideburns, he talks about weird stuff going on. And he keeps looking at his book because apparently all the wisdom is in his book. And they eat like savages. And then the story moves on to Elrond talking to Galadriel, and basically Galadriel talks down to him and acts like he's not
Right.
that important.
Yeah. Can I just say that that the elves with the short hair um are just weird.
It
They're
creeps
just,
me
they're just
out.
weird.
Well, Lord of
Yeah.
the Rings lore, they should have long, like, wispy hair sort of thing. So it's not lore accurate. But once again, this is a different story. We don't need to super measure it, but that's not how they play out in the story. So with the short hair, and my mother, like I watched this with my mother, she kept saying, man, he's got awful hair and it's very coiffed, if you will, very like fluffed Elrond's
is.
hair.
So when I say this, I know you'll know who I'm talking about, but Doogie Elrond.
Yeah, he does look a bit like Doogie Howser.
Yeah, Elrond looks like the coolest elf in elf school. That hair.
Well, one of the things they really play down Elrond.
Who's a
Like-
very important person, who should be hundreds of years old at this point, and they present him like he's 22.
The thing is that they for no apparent reason other than to say how looked down upon Elrond actually is. They this messenger comes in to talk to Elrond and is like, they're having a meeting, only elf lords allowed, and he's like, oh, okay.
Well, he is
and
an
then
elf lord.
he's like, oh, by the way, right, but in Rings of Power, apparently he's not. Apparently,
Yeah.
he's just like a nobody. Later, when you first meet Elrond, he's writing something, and it comes out later that he was writing the speech that Gil-galad gives to Galadriel, congratulating her for her service and telling her she gets to go back to Valinor.
Yeah.
And so Elrond is basically a nobody. He is a descendant of Luthien. He is a descendant of very, very noble families of humans and elves.
Well, he's nobility
he is
by
a
birth,
king.
flat out.
Yeah, he is a king in his own right, either by his elvish side or his human side. Maybe not king, but anyway, like I said, he is nobility. Either side of the family that you're going to look on, and they're treating him as a servant. And so, and
I think by the
it's
Hobbit,
just-
he is considered the highest ranking Noldor, so the High King of the Noldor in Middle Earth. Go ahead, Silver.
Yeah, that was something I found weird, was that when you first see him sitting in the tree, another elf comes up to him. It's like, oh yeah, you're not allowed to participate in the council today, just so you know. See ya.
Why would you show up to tell him that? That's kind of.
Yeah.
By the way, you're not important. Bye.
Bah.
Exactly. And that's the only reason that they put it in there, was to show us how unimportant this male elf is.
You think they're trying to
Meanwhile,
undermine?
I'd rather follow him.
You think they're trying to undermine the rulers to make them look like stuffy or full of themselves,
Or they're trying
can
to
see that.
undermine them so that we see how important and smart and capable Galadriel is.
Yeah. At any rate, they have a conversation. It shows more Harfoots and nothing important happens. They move on to Galadriel gets to go home. Hey everybody, Galadriel's going home, and they have the firework festival because the war is over for them, and Galadriel's going home. I don't remember elves doing fireworks, if I'm going to be honest. But all right, that's fine.
I think.
I think they're doing
I
a wink
think
and a
they
nod to
did.
the movies.
Well, there is that, but I think in the books, I'd have to go back to The Hobbit and read that or reread that part. But there may have been fireworks in Rivendell for the Midsummer Festival kind of thing when
Okay,
the Hobbit and the
but
dwarves got there. But
I have the impression that hey, there were hobbits in the original one, and then they also had fireworks in the first movie. We have to have those, and that's why there are
yeah,
fireworks, not because there's any legitimate reason. Anyway, her and Elrond have a conversation, and she talks down to him and gives this very aggressive and like demeaning like talk with him where she's like, "You have not seen what I have seen," and I'm like, "Wow." So there's nothing, and it's funny because she talks about like she's seen this amazing evil when she didn't fight in the war, when she wasn't involved in a lot of the rest of the conflicts, and yet somehow she's going to talk down to him where it's like, "I've seen more dead than you can't understand," and it's okay,
Yeah, and he's
help
like,
maybe
"What?
help him.
But I've seen my share of evil."
Well, and maybe help him
Just gonna
understand as
brush them.
opposed to trash talk him that he doesn't understand. Yeah, okay, tell him he
Yeah,
doesn't understand.
treats him like an idiot.
Yeah. Um, then we go to Southlands with Human Village and Don Lemon with the faded haircut that isn't realistic, but whatever. And Bronwyn, who's super awesome and the cleanest of the dirty people, and it's implied they have a relationship. And there seems to be some sickness. He overhears a conversation, and the cow shoots out sick milk, and he's like, "We better check it out."
yeah,
Also, they said that they're gonna get rid of the watchtowers and no longer watch the people in the south because they were people who sided with Morgoth. If you don't know anything about Lord of the Rings, Morgoth was the big bad, and Sauron was a lieutenant, and Morgoth gets taken out, and Sauron still exists, so he becomes the new bad guy.
yeah.
Oh, and also
Um,
her son is hiding like clearly evil sword that kind of gives you the impression they're doing a one ring thing where he touches it and he gets little sea stuff. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Unless you have something to say, Jason.
um, so there are a couple of things that they very, very painfully pointed out to us. There was this one human when he first went into the village. Uh, they end up like at the pub, which is this dirty hovel, and Arondir, that's his name. One of the humans confronts him and is like, you could see that there's hate between the humans and the elves in this area, and they went to a lot of trouble to point it out to us. They stressed it quite heavily that the elves, their presence was not appreciated,
Hmm.
which seemed, whatever. But then they go to the same extreme to point out that Bronwyn and Arondir are having a relationship.
Oh, did you know? Did you note the knife ear comment?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's not a term used in the works ever. At no point do people
no.
call elves knife ears. Do you know where it comes from?
Um, Not off the top of my head.
Dragon Age is where that comes from.
Ah,
Oh,
Yeah, so
well.
that's where that comment comes from. Clearly, one of the writers watched Dragon Age or played Dragon Age, the game, and really liked that derisive comment for elves, but that has nothing to do with Tolkien. It never shows up in anything. Yeah.
No,
Any
the humans never were really at odds with the elves.
well, it
They
depends on
never
which
really seemed to.
humans. There are like evil
Well,
humans.
for like the Haradrim and the Easterlings and stuff like that, but there was never really a like. If anything, the humans didn't care about the elves.
Yeah, they mostly had elf stuff to do. It's like the dwarves; they were in the mountains. It didn't
Yeah,
matter. Anyway, Galadriel's gonna leave on the boat. She's very reluctant. She gives a lot of stink eye and unhappy face as they go leave on the boat. And then there's a very interesting conversation that happens between Glorfindel and Celebrimbor, where they talk about how we have this secret thing that we're building, and we need Elrond's help. Hint, hint. It's gonna be rings. Um, and they make an interesting comment where they foresaw that if they didn't send her home, she would create the evil that she was trying to destroy. That's why she has to go home. And I guarantee you, that's what's going to happen. Is she's going to end up creating it, and it's all going to be her fault. Anyway, she gets on the boat, and then like literally they're getting to like heaven where a hole opens up, which is never described in the books, but whatever. This is how Rings of Power is going to present it, where a hole opens up as they're approaching Valinor. And you have to remember, they've sailed across the entirety of basically the Atlantic Ocean standing for some reason. And they all
Yeah.
start singing as they approach Valinor. And she gets trepidation and she's like, I can't do it. She turns and she jumps off the boat into the water. In the meantime, everybody's looking around as a comet flies across the sky. It's like an evil omen. And the Harfoot see it. And then literally people across the planet in areas that shouldn't see it are seeing it. They see this comet. And it lands.
Everyone can see it.
Yeah, everybody can
the
see
same
it.
direction.
Yes. Everybody can see it, and it lands weirdly enough near the Harfoots, and then the girl Sam and girl Frodo go and see. I think it might just be girl Frodo, but anyway, she goes and sees,
Yeah,
and there's this naked guy with a beard who's going to be our Gandalf proxy. If not, he's actually Gandalf. I'm going to treat this like this is how the show wants to present it. By the way, this is not remotely how it happens in the books. He does not fall out of the sky, especially when Valinor, heaven, is a literal location. Why would the gods just chuck him to Earth? Like, this is weird.
Yeah, seriously.
The
thing is
he got there on a boat. He would have already been there, but he would have gotten there by boat. Like, they wouldn't have just thrown him at Middle Earth.
From Valinor. Yeah.
and they threw him so hard. I'm going to reveal that this is stuff for the next one, but they threw him so hard he loses his memory, by the way. So he doesn't know he is. But yeah, basically the gods just chucked him at Middle Earth and they're like, here, fix it. Yeah, and then he shows up and he's just this guy with beard and he's supposed to be wizard ? And everybody thinks it's probably Gandalf because of the Harfoots, but then they're like, ooh, it could be Saruman. And it's like, oh, that could be
Saruman.
That could be a thing. Nobody knows. But yeah, reflections.
If they do make it Saruman, if they make it anybody but Gandalf, they're really missing an opportunity.
Well, it seems like they're trying to go, see, Gandalf like the hobbits from the beginning. I'm sorry, Harfoots from the beginning.
Right, exactly. See, that's the thing. Gandalf always concerned himself with the other races of Middle Earth, whereas Saruman didn't. And so if they do make this someone who's not Gandalf, it will subvert our expectations, but it wouldn't be a good move for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like we all know who this is, but there's no reason why we should expect you to actually treat this well, because so far you haven't. So
Silver?
it could be anything.
Yeah, it's very strange that they're like, oh, let's chuck him to Middle Earth. When wasn't there supposed to be? I don't know the others. Besides Saruman and Radagast, was
The
one that
two
was
blue
like
there were
wizards.
two-
pink and blue.
Two blue wizards that are never named.
Yeah, they don't have names.
So were they also just thrown to Middle Earth, like
I don't know.
just chucked down
They might have been.
like a baseball?
Anyway, conclusions to the first episode. Excited for what's going to happen episode 2?
No.
Episode 1 definitely does not heighten expectations.
Fact that they leave Galadriel in the mid. This is basically like Galadriel is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There is nothing for thousands of miles in any direction, and they're supposed to expect us to think that she treaded water and swam back to Middle Earth.
Uh-huh.
I mean, come on, what kind of morons do you take
She's
us for?
Galadriel. She's awesome and better than everybody. What are you talking about?
I mean, it would make more sense if, like, she jumped in the water and suddenly found she could walk on it.
By the way, Galadriel is supposed to be like 6'4", and we have a tiny little one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she's supposed to be gigantic. And also at this point, because if I remember in commentary before the show that the writers are talking about, well, she's younger and more impetuous, and she's not the one that we know in Lord of the Rings and that sort of thing. And I was like, she's like 1,000 years old at this point. What do you mean younger?
Yeah.
She's older than the moon. What the heck are you talking about?
They don't understand how elves work. She was young in Valinor when
Yeah.
she lived in heaven. By this time, there have been thousands of years since Valinor and the trees were destroyed and the elves came west to Middle Earth. She is literally several thousand years old by this time. She is in no way, shape, or form young.
Yeah,
Not
she's
even for
got
an
that
elf, she's
youthful energy and anger to her. At any rate, expect an extensive review once again of episode 2. And if you're thinking, oh well, I don't want to have to watch every episode. Of course, you would want to watch every episode of this podcast. But I'm going to end up releasing these one at a time, like these discussions on the YouTube channel, and then I'll just combine them all as one big video when we're done. Just in case you want to revisit people having fresh eyes on Rings of Power and what their impressions are. And this is what's yeah. And we're going to build right up to Rings of Power Season 2. As we end this discussion, we're going to be doing the same thing into Season 2. So get hyped for that.
Oh gosh.
But yes, it was a time. It was a super time.
If you like the show, follow Rhett, Jason, Ross, and Silver, the world's most lethally stupid internet personalities, on Twitter at DG Podcast or on Instagram at Distracted Gamers. If you liked or hated what you heard here today, you can email them at thedistractedgamers@gmail.com and share your feelings. Not that Jason would care, since he hasn't any, of course.
Oh my God, it's so juicy.